So that's interesting. We don't have a ghost now. So I suspect that the problem was not with my phone, but with the neon lighting, which I think it's reacting to some kind of vibration or light wave from from that type of bulb, which I have in my room. So I think that's what's causing the wavy lines. And now I'm in candlelight because we are doing a video about shamanism. Now, I do not know as much as some people about shamanism, but I read a book. I did not read the whole book because this book is a phone book. It is a massive tome. But I read the book on shamanism, part of it, by Mircea Eliade. Mircea Eliade, or Iliade, I'm not sure how to say it. Published by Princeton University. And it had a lot of interesting stuff in it. I always thought that a shaman was just like a medicine man or some kind of tribal holy man, but that is not the anthropological definition of a shaman. According to this book, a shaman is someone who has gone through intense initiation and must have 3 abilities to be considered a shaman. 1, the ability to talk to the dead. 2, the ability to manipulate fire. And 3, the ability to fly. No biggie, just, regular CV for holy man. I don't even think druids had that much. I have been asked before whether a druid could be considered a type of Celtic shaman, but no, they cannot, because first of all, I don't think one of the things that shamans typically use is some kind of intoxicant or mood enhancer in order to communicate with spirits or fly. Because obviously it's been suggested that when they're talking about flying, they're talking about astral projection. I don't believe there is any record of druids using intoxicants. Druids were typically very focused on their mental abilities, especially memory. And because they used an oral tradition, they never wrote down any of their knowledge, and I think they had to remember a lot of stuff, and intoxicants are generally not good for memory. So I think not. Now, one of the things that was really interesting that I read in this book by Mircea Eliade was, I'll link this in the description, by the way. It's called The Ancient Techniques of Ecstasy. Was that in tribes which practice shamanism, and usually most of these examples of shamanism are from the Mongolian, Siberian, kind of those sorts of shamans where the word shaman is still kind of used. Usually people with some kind of anomalous mental quality, which might be considered a disorder or just some kind of diverse quality by our standards in modern Western culture, I guess, such as epilepsy, borderline personality disorder, schizophrenia, bipolar, these kinds of people, and also homosexuals. these kinds of people were often sent for training to become shamans, which did not necessarily ensure that they would become shamans, because they had to survive the initiation ritual, which often, from what I could tell from this book, involved some kind of mutilation or scarring. And it was interesting because I was watching a video about just how many people with different mental disorders often get into cutting themselves. And I was kind of reflecting, I wonder if in a sort of subconscious kind of a way they're trying to initiate themselves. But anyway, that it was just like this completely fanciful thought that came into my head. That was not from the book. And so basically, shamans were taken through this very rigorous initiation ritual, which could involve, usually did involve, some kind of cutting, scarring, and some kind of journey, like a vision quest type thing, where they would, and usually intoxicants would be involved in sending them on that journey. And they had to go through some kind of a psychic self-confrontation. And what I think that Mircea Eliade even said, I don't know if he was saying like, if he was just using the terminology that the tribe would use, or if he was actually saying this as an anthropologist. But supposedly, after they went through initiation, they would be cured of whatever their condition was before. I don't particularly, this was addressing epilepsy, where the belief was in these tribes that the epilepsy was the spirits trying to communicate and sending the person into a fit, but because they weren't trained, it was sort of coming in at random times. But supposedly, after initiation, these shamans were able to induce a fit, basically, where the spirits talked, and or suppress, like it wouldn't come on them spontaneously anymore. And where I lived in India, in the mountains, there are these people called gurs, which I've talked about in other videos. And they did channel entities, I don't know, gods usually, but usually they would induce it, but I have actually seen them go into the trance spontaneously, but it was not like an epileptic fit. It was very much kind of, well, there were different, depending on the deity and the particular gur involved. Some gods were known to be very wrathful, so the oracles or the gurus for those gods would sometimes have quite a animated fit, almost seeming, and then they would speak in the language of the gods, and then usually the high priest would tell everyone what it meant, which is convenient. But there were other gurus who spoke quite calmly and lucid, but they would just be kind of like in some kind of trance when they spoke. And anyway, it was just sort of intriguing because I could see some parallels between the gurus and the way the shamans were described in Mircea Eliade's book. And I definitely knew of a couple of shamans who had been or were gay, and some others. I definitely knew some people who were taken for initiation because they had some kind of fit, there were a couple of girls also. Usually, I spoke to some people in my area who said that it was not possible for a girl to become a guru. But then I read in a book that there were female gurus. And then I also spoke to some friends from different sort of tribes who said that they had relatives, sisters and cousins, and who regularly spoke with the voice of usually the yoginis, which are these wild kind of chaos goddesses, sort of, they're considered, even though the name means like an adept. But anyway, I don't know why I wanted to do this video about shamanism. I wanted to try out the candlelight, which seems to be very successful, actually, I have to say. So I may do more of this kind of lighting, because apparently the neon is not conducive, and I'm very relieved that it's not the fault of my phone, because I don't have to buy a new one now. Is there anything else? I think that shamans also are reputed to be able to talk to animals, because they can talk to all the spirits, not just the spirits of the dead. They can talk to kind of a non-human entity spirits and also animal spirits. So they have all of that in their repertoire, supposedly. Anyway, it was interesting the way that Mircea Eliade had written his book, because usually when you're reading a book by an anthropologist, it's very obvious the way they're describing it that they do not believe in anything that is being described. With Mircea Eliade, it was not completely clear. It was sort of like he was writing it as a shaman, or she. I'm not sure actually if Mircea is a he or a she. But anyway, very intriguing book. A lot of people that I spoke to who were pagans said that they thought that it was too complicated the way it was written. I didn't. I actually thought it was pretty understandable. I mean, it's bulky and it's a lot of info, but I found it easier to read than The Lord of the Rings, quite honestly, which I found very hard to get through. So, so I would recommend it. Although I didn't read it through. I mean, I read like 3 chapters, I guess. That's really not very much. Anyway, I will leave this here, and I have to make another video. So this is about to be uploaded, and then I will be back soon.